For 80 years, there's been nothing but grim news when it comes to cane toads. They've spread across the top end. And in Western Australia, the pressure is on to protect as many native species as possible, but also work out if and how the toads can be stopped in their tracks to protect national parks and horticulture areas. Kimberley reporter Erin Park travelled across the region to take a look at the efforts underway to halt the march of the cane toad.
It's a dramatic landscape along the East Kimberley coast, with the crocodile-infested Ord River snaking through red ranges. But this research team isn't here for the scenery. They're on their way to the front line of an ecological battle being waged in Northern Australia.
How's it going?
Hey Dirty, how are you?
Okay, yeah, good, thanks. How you doing?
They've flown to Adolphus Island, 50 kilometres north of Wyndham. It's uninhabited and isolated, but almost by accident has become a large and living laboratory, being used to test out what chance of survival native animals have in the face of the cane toad invasion.
The significance of Adolphus is that whilst it is hot and dry and it's not particularly awesome field conditions all year round, particularly November, you know, it's relatively easy to get to. We have the opportunity to really study and observe what's happening, you know, with quolls, with toads and other native species. Plan is
It's the last field trip for the year for this team from the Department of Parks and Wildlife and the Ballangurra Rangers.
So we'll just get the cameras and go and set them up that gorge.
They're setting up stop-motion cameras that over coming months will record the mix of toads and native wildlife on this 4,000-hectare island.
This is a camera trap. We use this to take still pictures of any of the native animals that come along here. And it usually works on a movement sensor, so any movement it makes and they'll catch it. We put it on a tree or even a rock or something, and then we just secure it as best as possible so it doesn't fall out of the tree. Bloody inquisitive birds or anything coming, like especially crows and that, come and try and pull it out of the blooming tree. Make sure it's nice and securely tight. So nice and secure, and then it doesn't move, and then we try and face the camera sort of in a southerly direction, and then try to find a nice rock here. And sort of face it down a bit. All right, so yeah, that's probably take out all these bits and grasses here, so that nothing moves and it doesn't take big more photos of grass moving.
Adolphus Island became a focal point in 2014 after a shock discovery during a wildlife survey.
our first night in camp. We went out head torching, looking to see, you know, what we could find, and I unfortunately found a toad. So, you know, I suppose, you know, realistically, it shouldn't have been much of a surprise because, you know, this is in the mouth of the Cambridge Gulf. At that point in time, you know, toads were on the mainland to the east of the island. They'd been in Wyndham for a few years.
It turns out the toads are surprisingly good at crossing over the ocean.
So rafting is basically them holding on to bits of timber and leaf litter and stuff like that, which comes down the river in the floods and gets washed onto the island.
Ballangurra Ranger James Birch Gallagher says locals have spotted toads floating out to sea.
My mates are fishing out here, and you go past, hey, hey, that's a cane toad going past, boys, on a log, you know. And he's floating past on a bloody log. And another one, yeah, doing his breaststroke swimming past, yeah. They can last in the salt water, cane toads up to 15 days in salt water. Yeah.
So attention instead turned to seeing what could be learned from studying the interaction of toads and native animals within the controlled environment of Adolphus. The local rangers knew the cane toads were a formidable opponent for Australian wildlife. They're toxic, fast breeding, and have no natural predators.
The animals on the island here, they haven't got really nowhere to go. I mean, you know, they're sort of trapped, so, I mean, I thought that after a limited amount of time, there'd be nothing left, you know. I mean, especially because the cane toad's so lethal, you know, to all our native wildlife.
Month after month, the camera traps have been installed and collected. The results have been surprisingly good.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is a quoll, northern quoll.
The cameras recorded dozens of toads, but they also recorded hundreds of reptiles and marsupials, back in force against the odds.
We certainly have seen evidence on our camera traps that the impact is not complete eradication of native species as a result of toads reaching an island. We've seen, you know, like the fact that northern quolls are still present here, given that toads have been here for a few years now, is a pretty awesome result.
It reflects a pattern seen on the mainland, where the first wave of big, fast-moving toads proves fatal, but the smaller follow-up toads less so.
They learn off each other, I reckon, and they see first couple of animals, you know, dying in front of them, so they thought, they'll probably think to themselves, oh, you know, that might be a good thing to have a feed of.
Another important lesson from Adolphus was just how tough the cane toads really are.
The thing that surprised the research team is just how long the cane toads have been able to survive here on Adolphus Island. During the dry season, like at the moment, it is very hot and there are actually no exposed water bodies. It's thought the toads are actually using goanna burrows like this one here to hide away in the cool, moist soil during the long, hot, dry season months.
The ability of toads to survive in dry areas will affect just how far down the WA coast they eventually move. And it forms the basis of an ambitious plan to stop the cane toads in their tracks.
So we think we can stop the spread of toads from here to here by managing about 100 dams in this region.
Darren Southwell heads up a team from the University of Melbourne that believes it's found a way to block the cane toad front line from moving further west.
What we were looking at in this research is to develop what we've called a waterless barrier in the landscape to try and contain the spread of cane toads between the Kimberley region and the Pilbara region of Australia.
Toads rely on plentiful water to survive and travel. But just south of Broome lies an arid coastal strip, which could prove to be the toad's Achilles heel.
We're really making the most of this landscape feature where the Great Sandy Desert almost reaches the coast. So the cane toads really have to squeeze through this narrow bottleneck or sort of choke point to reach the Pilbara and then continue spreading into Western Australia.
The only water bodies in the area are around 100 dams, dotted on cattle stations. If they're converted to water tanks and troughs, it's thought the landscape will be too dry for toads to cross.
We found that this method of containing toads is very cost effective. We estimated that it will cost about $4 to $5 million over 50 years, which is about only $100,000 a year.
One of the biggest stations in the area is Thangu. Manager Janice Bell says the idea has merit.
I think it's probably the most feasible way to stop them coming down the coast here. As people who care about the land and about nature, I think it's certainly worth the effort to consult the pastoralists and just see where industry can help out.
Stopping the toads south of Broome would protect several national parks and the horticultural precinct of the Gascoyne. And with at least 5 years until the toad front line is expected to arrive in the area, there is still time to make it happen. But not all are convinced.
I think we need to be mindful of what the future is in that area in terms of agriculture and pastoralism, you know, before we start investing a lot of money in something that, you know, looks good